very difficult to engage with South Asians.
Families where the wife just steps in, does all the caring, and that's a huge responsibility.
South Asians feel that it's just a general part of growing old, but it's not.
Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
Now, we've got a bit of a personal story to tell you today, and that's the fact that we lived with our grandparents for many, many years, as many South Asians do, and one of the things that we did go through and learn as we grew up was dementia is something that we don't know enough about, and we did experience it, especially with our granddad. So I always say he'd tell a joke and then he'd tell it again, and you know, we're very good grandkids, so we would laugh again. But it was something we hadn't realised was something that we needed to know more about. So today, we have three fantastic guests who will be talking to us about dementia. We've got Linda here, who is from Alzheimer's Society. We've got Dee from the Great Western Hospital under the Dementia UK, and she's a dementia nurse. And we've got Susan from Public Health, who's a specialist in Swindon Council. But before we start, what is dementia? And I'm going to put the questions out then. Whoever comes in first gets the floor.
Wow, guys, shall I go first then? Okay, so we class dementia as an umbrella term for a range of progressive conditions that affect the brain. So the brain's made up of nerve cells, which are neurons that communicate with each other, sending messages. And what happens when we have dementia? Dementia damages the nerve cells in the brain, so messages can't be sent effectively, which prevents the brain from functioning normally. Now, there are which I didn't realise till I started with Dementia UK, there's actually over 200 subtypes of dementia, but most of us normally know about, I think Linda would probably agree, about the four main types of dementia, which we've got vascular dementia, Alzheimer's, which I'll let Linda talk about. We've got Lewy body dementia and frontal lobe dementia. So they're the four main types. And unfortunately, in the BAME Society, in South Asia, patients or people with dementia quite often get vascular dementia because the incidences are that people in South Asia are more likely to get diabetes, high blood sugar, and so this form of dementia vascular is usually more common in South Asia. So
as soon as you said that, me and Bal were like, oh wow, it all connects now, because quite a lot of the family probably have got diabetes and the blood pressure and so forth, and you're like, oh my god, it's all connecting.
On that, and we're going to talk about the Alzheimer's in a second as well, Linda, but as soon as you said vascular, I'm like, okay, like Taj said, it's connected. How does vascular dementia happen? Why is it vascular? What does that mean?
So vascular, to do with the blood flow. So basically, so if you are diabetic or you've got high blood sugar, you sort of eat a high fat diet, your cholesterol levels can be raised. It all affects the vascular structures and the blood flow to the vein. And sometimes when your arteries get sort of, what can we say for a better word, clogged up, it prevents good blood flow to the brain. So this is where we get the vascular types of dementia, which is what, like I said, originally the second most common dementia that there is. So that's why in sort of like BAME Society, it's more common because you are of a higher incidence of having sort of diabetes and the high blood pressures.
We'll come back to vascular dementia because I think that's going to be a large part of what we talk about. Linda, you mentioned you work for the Alzheimer's Society. Could you tell us a bit about Alzheimer's as well?
Okay. So first of all, Alzheimer's, I work for Alzheimer's Society, but Alzheimer's Society also, we deal with all the different types of dementia. Even though we are called Alzheimer's Society, we work along every type of dementia. We support people with every type of dementia. So I will quickly talk about Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease happens when there is buildup of proteins, and there are two types of proteins, which is the amyloid proteins and then the tau proteins. So when they deposit in the brain, they form tangles, which leads to the death of the brain cells connecting, and as a result, the brain cells died, leading to Alzheimer's diseases. So Alzheimer's is mainly due to protein buildup that form tangles and plaques in the brain that kills the brain cells.
Again, is this to do with diet?
Yes, almost all dementia would say diet, healthy living, healthy diet. So yes.
So when you say protein buildup, I suppose it's the same sort of question that Taj just asked. What causes that protein to build up? Is it too excessive protein in the body, or what? What is that?
No, it's not an excessive type, excessive protein. But and this is something researchers are still researching about.
Okay.
That they know there is buildup of protein called tau and amyloid proteins, but it's got nothing to do with taking lots of protein.
And how prevalent is Alzheimer's? Because we always hear about it. As I've grown up, I've heard about Alzheimer's, and to be fair, I think the dementia that I've seen in my own family has been the vascular type of dementia. But I've never heard of vascular dementia. I've heard of Alzheimer's, however, though. So is Alzheimer's number one in that list that Dee's just given,
Yeah.
or?
Yeah,
it is.
So
Okay.
Alzheimer's is the most common. Then, like I said, then secondly, vascular dementia. And then we've got the frontal lobe dementia and the Lewy body dementia. So you probably heard on the news recently, Bruce Willis, he's got like the frontal temporal lobe dementia. So that's been a big sort of storyline recently. And then dementia with Lewy bodies, which is quite often can be linked with things like Parkinson's disease and other diseases. So but like vascular dementia, so like you said, you've heard of that and it's been prevalent in your family. So with like high blood pressure, the risk of strokes, heart attacks, strokes, anything that, you know, which is causing reduced blood flow to the brain that then damages localized cells in the brain, really. So so the importance of a healthy diet, so like low fat diet, alcohol in moderation, stopping smoking, all these our everyday dietary factors affect the brain. So I think there should be a bit more of a campaign on sort of healthy diet and lifestyle, really, to help prevent dementia.
Another thing that sort of recent research has shown is that hearing loss can also have an effect on dementia. So we're sort of trying to urge people to go and have their hearing checked, particularly as they get older. And we know that dementia is more common as it's the prevalence in over 65s is much higher.
Can you explain that a bit more? How do you mean hearing?
So if we look at sort of the statistics in Swindon, so around 1 in 14 people in Swindon aged over 65 could develop dementia, and then that goes to 1 in 6 in over 80s. So the older people get, the more prevalence of dementia. So obviously we're living longer, so we have larger and looking forward at projected rates as people get older, and there'll be higher rates of dementia.
So we're learning so much, and we haven't even started yet. And I don't think there's enough information out there about diet, because I wouldn't even thought.
Well, the thing is, going back to what we've been talking about, you know, we've seen it in our family. We didn't know that anything about dementia. We did pick up on perhaps it was, but we hadn't realised it was vascular dementia. So again, going back to that, you don't realise the association, not only with diet. We know about diabetes, we know about blood pressure because they are high health priority areas for the South Asian community. But I hadn't realised the link, and I've actually got, I've got a degree in biomedical science. So how ridiculous is that? Well, I hadn't realised that. That's crazy.
Well, what Susan said as well about hearing, because our dad, his hearing's gone down at the moment, and he doesn't want to get it checked out because he's like, he doesn't have to listen to our mum so much. But now you've said this about how hearing and dementia is linked, I'm like, okay, we better get on the phone to him. Why is the hearing and the dementia linked? Is there any research to say how it's linked or why it's linked?
Well, I think it's probably about the cognitive, neural pathways and being able to socialise and follow conversations and learning and things like that.
Quite interesting, because I read that recently as well, and my mum's deaf and has hearing aids, and I always go on, but she's like 81 and her brain's she's really sprightly for her age, but yeah, so I don't know, I think they're still doing more research into it, but it's like, as a nurse, we always say, when you're trying to communicate with a patient, even dementia patients, it's really important that they've got their glasses on, they've got their hearing aids in, and they're able to hear you and see you and you speak clearly to them.
I mean, on that point, so aside from the vascular side of it, is that social element then you're saying? Because if you I don't know what the research is saying, but the social aspect of it.
Part of dementia, sometimes when patients get dementia in initial signs, somebody may become withdrawn, become sort of more socially isolated because they're not understanding what's going on and they're losing memory. They can sort of like withdraw into themselves. So and I think that sort of may play a part in it, in dementia as well. So social isolation. So
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I lost my hearing because I had sinus problems and my hearing just went. Yeah. And you have to start lip reading, and you're like, I can't be bothered with this. I'd rather just not engage. And you just go into your own little world. So it connects and it makes sense.
When you're struggling with hearing, there is no stimulation. You can't socialize, and lack of stimulation can lead to a risk of developing dementia.
This might be a really silly question, but I'm going to ask it because why not? I've got the chance to do it, right? Is dementia the same as depression?
No. So I'd sort of jump in there quickly. One of the real things which I found sort of like in nursing generally and with dementia, it's really important. There's a lot of medical conditions which could mimic dementia, or you think, oh my goodness, I might be having dementia. So I'll just go through a few if that's all right with everybody. Yeah. So things like thyroid problems can cause you to have like a brain fog, and a big one which I'm going through, I'll share this with you at the moment, ladies, menopause.
I'm with you.
Right. Yeah. Going back a couple of years ago, menopause, oh my God, I would be on the ward trying to run the ward, looking after about 30 odd patients, trying to remember what I was doing next. Even with a sheet of paper, I would pick up a sheet of paper and think, oh my God, what am I doing next? And I would be reading it blankly. So things like brain fog, delirium is a real big thing as well. So sometimes when patients get infections, especially the elderly ladies, when they get urine infections, this can cause something called delirium. And a patient might not have dementia, but they can still get a delirium. And when you get a delirium on top of a dementia, that makes things even worse. Another thing, which is quite common in ladies as well, and men, is vitamin B12 deficiency. So if you lack vitamin B12, it can cause things like confusion, fatigue, irritability, weakness, things what can be associated with dementia, but you might not be suffering from dementia. And you talked, sorry, I should go back to the point, depression. You talked about depression. So stress and anxiety, getting depressed, having lack of sleep, low mood, all can be signs of dementia, but can also, patients with dementia can also get depression with the dementia. So, it's really important out there, especially for South Asian communities, when they've got any signs which you think could possibly be dementia, is to get the early checks with your GP. Like I say, because a lot of conditions, medical conditions, could be show symptoms which you think may be dementia but might not be, and they could be ruled out and you could be treated for. But it's really important to get, I think everybody agreed, Linda especially, is get an early diagnosis with your GP when you think there's any signs, memory problems, communication problems, anything you've noticed changing, somebody forgetting things, repeating themselves, all these little things. It's always best to get an early checkout with the GP.
If there is an early checkout, how does that make it better, if that's the right word to use?
So I think like getting an early diagnosis is really important. So going to the GP, getting the basic tests, so getting your blood screened, getting your blood pressure checked, the doctor doing basic memory tests, really just checking basic memory function. Then possible if the GP then feels there's a possibility that they may have dementia, they can then get a CT scan done or an MRI scan. Early referral to the memory clinic, and unfortunately due to COVID, memory clinics I think all over the country have had the same thing. They've had a build up and waiting times have been extended. But yeah, so it's really important. So the earlier you get a diagnosis, the better it is, because if you're seen in the memory clinic, they can test you, they can do further tests. And I think with South Asian culture as well, because it's always been a taboo subject, I've talked to a few of my colleagues, I've talked to some of my Muslim friends who said back in the sort of earlier days, in their grandparents' days, like dementia was always taboo. They thought you were possessed with jinns. Other South Asian cultures think that you were possessed by witchcraft or something. So there's so many barriers around it, and people are frightened to talk about it, don't want to admit it. A lot of South Asians as well feel that it's just a general part of growing old, but it's not. It is not just a general thing about getting old. One of my friends said, "Oh no, Dee, my grandparents thought, it's mad, it's a sign of madness, or it's a thing everybody gets when they get old," but that's not the case.
Susan, can I bring you in here, because you do quite a lot of work within the community. What has been your view of exactly what Dee's just said from the South Asian perspective? What are you hearing about dementia? What is the South Asian viewpoint of it?
We're trying to do more and more work to try and understand, and obviously Swindon is really diverse, and making sure that our services fit with our population is really important to us, and overcoming barriers. I think, as Dee said, there is sort of a reluctance of what dementia is, recognizing it. We see families where, say it's a husband and wife, say the husband develops dementia and the wife just steps in, does all the caring, and that's a huge responsibility, and obviously a huge impact on their lives as well. So maybe reluctance to come forward and seek support, and that is a universal issue, but particularly with different.
Do you think language might be a barrier as well? Because the older generation, they might not speak English. What is there to help them if they do come for help and support?
More and more research is going on now about, so as Dee said, at the memory clinic they use diagnostic tools, and there is lots of research around, are they appropriate? So are they appropriate for people that may have lived in different countries and then lived in England, or just the cultural appropriateness of things and the language barriers. So there is some research that's being put out now where a culturally appropriate tool is being piloted. So that's something that we're looking at. But yeah, the language barrier is really difficult, for sure.
Linda, in regards to the Alzheimer's Society, I mean, I've heard of Alzheimer's Society and the research that they do and how much work they do. But do you get much of an approach from the South Asian community to the Alzheimer's Society?
Yes, nationally, we do, and we try to reach out to South Asian communities, and the Alzheimer's Society have been involved in research, and which I could give an example of two. One is already in place, where Susan talked about a tool. So the South Asian Dementia Pathway Toolkit has been developed. It's called ADAPT. Where helps with the pathway and the diagnostics, because one thing we found out was even the diagnostic tools is not appropriate for the minority. So this is based on specifically a tool that was made for the South Asians, to help, a diagnostic tool to help in supporting people from the South Asians community.
How does that tool help the South Asian? Because if it was adapted for the South Asian community, it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to find out what do you do different with this tool.
So it is tailored to their culture, to the needs. So this was co-produced with the South Asian community. So it wasn't people who produced the any other. It was led and informed by the South Asian. So I would say it's tailored to the culture. It's culturally appropriate.
How do we access this toolkit then?
It's like a part of the test in the memory clinic. So the memory clinic would do it's called an ACE test. So it's based on pictures, and like Linda said, in British culture, our pictures would be like things of British animals which were native to us, fruits, vegetables, symbols which are related to Britain. So the Asian toolkit has things like symbols or pictures which be related to those type of countries.
I know, I love that, because that's just taken me back. I remember going to hospital with my granddad, and I think there was one question of who's the Queen, and I'm like, we don't tend to talk about that in our household. So that's so interesting. So what kind of, wow, that makes sense now. What day? I remember my granddad being asked what day it was. That day, we don't know the days in English at that point. So
so that's the basic short memory test. But like the bigger one, the ACE test, which Linda was been talking about, is more. It's more in depth. There's a lot more to it, but it's pictures, numbers, and things related to, like you say, the country. And normally in Great Britain, they ask you to say an address, then repeat the address back, ask who the Queen is, ask who the Prime Minister is. And it's quite interesting, really. I've just been looking after a South Asian family in the hospital, and it's really hard because he has dementia. He didn't speak English. His wife had poor English. So I had to get like translators to translate. But also another thing, what happens quite often with dementia is people can revert back to their mother tongue. So the fact that he did used to speak some English, but now that his dementia has progressed, he now only speaks in his language. And however, that even talking to his family with an interpreter, even some of the words that he uses, he doesn't speak a lot anyway anymore. So that's another barrier to it all. So it's very interesting, and it must be quite difficult at a memory clinic to do the testing. So
just something that some carers have said to us is keeping a diary can be really useful, because sometimes when you're in the appointment and put on the spot about, okay, well, what have you seen different with someone's behaviour or a loved one or what have you, so keeping a diary can be a really good way of spotting changes and demonstrating changes in behaviour, which would demonstrate and help the clinician to look at dementia.
And that's something we always encourage people to do. And Alzheimer's Society also have a checklist. So you can go through the checklist. That will help you. Because sometimes when you go to the GP and you do the memory test and you passed, on a good day, you will pass the memory test and you are left to go back. But when you have the checklist and you discuss what you've seen with the checklist, or like Susan said, you've made a diary of concerns you have with the GP, that helps speed up referral to the memory clinic and for a diagnosis.
Linda, you mentioned a good day. So can there be good days and bad days, and why does that happen?
Yes, there are good days and there are bad days. Because the memory, and I always use the brain. I compare the brain to Christmas fairy lights, because the brain is made up of electrical impulses. Sometimes on a Christmas fairy light, it stops working without nothing without you doing anything, and sometimes it comes off. It comes on. It starts working normally, and that's how the brain works. So the electrical impulses, sometimes they stop connecting, and sometimes they work, and that is a characteristics with people with dementia. So sometimes they have a good day, sometimes they have a bad day, and that's all due to electrical impulses in the brain. So that's why they have even these medications that helps with the symptoms, to help with the electrical impulses. So that's how I usually explain good days and bad days to people, because on a good day, the electrical impulses are connecting all right, but on a bad day, it just stops and it connects, it stops and it connects.
I'm going to bring this right back, because firstly, let's go back to the fact. I'm just thinking about myself. I've got a bad memory, and I put that down to stress, and that's something that I've realised. At what point would I say, well, actually, maybe there's something more to this, and perhaps there's not, but how would I stop that as I grow older? At what point should I be like, no, I need to go to the GP and get this checked?
If you start noticing, like Linda said and Susan said, it's good to keep a diary. So if you've noticed changes, say like you'll forget, everybody forgets everyday things, like you might put your car keys down and think, oh God, where did I put my car keys down? I was putting washing away once in my earring cupboard and landed up having my mobile phone in my hand, put my washing in the earring cupboard with my mobile phone, and then spent the rest of the day looking for my mobile phone and retracing my steps. So
I did that the other day.
So I think, if you're noticing these changes, make a little diary. Also look at your general health, if you've been feeling unwell in any other way, if you make sure your blood pressure's okay, you've had recent blood tests. So, if you're noticing or feeling unwell as well, obviously go to the GP, but just keep a diary of things changing. If you're looking at maybe like a parent or a grandparent, if you find that they are sort of forgetting your name and that's becoming more and more, or they're forgetting like a name for a daily object, or they're repeating themselves, I think, or having difficulty word finding, these sorts of things can be sort of signs of, dementia may be developing. But like I said, also it could be sort of another medical reason. So if you notice it and it's becoming more and more of a daily habit that they're forgetting your name or forgetting how to do things, and forgetting things like doing daily tasks. So if you said to somebody about going to make a cup of tea and they're forgetting to make a cup of tea, and I'll share this with you, this would probably make people laugh, but when my dad first had dementia, even as a nurse, without a dementia specialism then, I didn't really notice. Sort of like every day he would write down by his phone, like, got a doctor's appointment, got a dentist appointment. And I was thinking, yeah, that's just a little bit of old age forgetfulness, as you do. And then it wasn't till he had a heart attack that, and he went into hospital, that I realised something was wrong, and I was getting his house ready for him to come out. And then I looked in his freezer, and he'd been out shopping, and he'd bought the same thing every time he went shopping. So he had a freezer full of all the same food. And then I looked in his cupboard and realised that he hadn't been taking his medication. So all these things sort of started to make sense then. And then I asked him to make me a cup of tea once. I went round there, and I didn't ask him. I went round there. He said, "Oh, do you want a cup of tea?" I said, "Yeah, I love a cup of tea." Went out to the kitchen, and it was the steps of making a cup of tea. So he went to the fridge, got the milk, but instead of filling the kettle with water, he filled the kettle with milk and boiled the kettle with the milk in it, causing the kettle to fur up and go all frothy, milk everywhere. And we actually got through about 4 kettles in the end, where he kept forgetting the sequence of doing things. So if you notice these everyday things, the latest Alzheimer's ad, I love that, the Val one with the man making the cup of tea, that always brings tears to my eyes. It reminds me of my dad. So yes, these everyday things that people do, and you suddenly sort of just picking up on it. But like I said, even as a nurse at the time, I didn't really notice when my dad first started developing it till at least probably a year in, I would have said.
So we know within the South Asian community, dementia rates are high. Firstly, do we know
Yeah.
roughly what the
Yeah,
rates are?
so it's estimated at the moment, I think, about 25,000 ethnic minorities have dementia in the UK, and this is meant to double by 2026. And we say at the moment, anyway, every 3 minutes somebody is diagnosed with dementia, so that's quite high. And like Susan would probably agree, Swindon population's aging. Everybody, we are living longer, and the population of the whole country, people are living longer. The elderly population's growing, and Swindon's no exception. So
with the rates being high and doubling over the next few years, Susan, I just from my own personal experience, we're becoming more health aware. I know, looking at my parents, they're very much. My dad does his 12,000 steps before we've even woken up. The older generation are well aware that diabetes is very high within the community. Blood pressure, cholesterol. I mean, he's got a blood pressure machine on every few hours. So why, although we're getting that awareness of health, why is it doubling? What's going on?
I think obviously obesity, putting on weight, our activity, our rates of activity, across the board, particularly with lockdown and COVID, dare I say, talk about COVID, but I think it's kind of had an effect. So I think all that has a bearing. Obviously, we eat more convenience foods, processed foods, fruit and vegetables, things like the cost of living crisis. So people are struggling to feed themselves well with budgets. So all those things have an impact. So it is kind of looking at small things you can do to healthy mind, healthy body, stopping smoking, things like that, alcohol, lowering your alcohol intake, things like that.
Linda, with the Alzheimer's Society, is there very much research being done within the South Asian community? And if the answer is no, the answer is no, because I've heard from a consultant that I've recently spoken to that getting people from the South Asian community to enroll into research is very hard in itself.
It is very hard. Alzheimer's Society, I know at the moment they are investigating the role of the obligation, willingness, and preparedness for caregivers within the Asian community, which is led by Dr. Sadia Parvin. And another one currently is led by Dr. Mukadem. And this is aimed to explore the risk of South Asian community, dementia risk in the South Asian communities through investigating both genetic risk factors and the risk factors such as blood pressure and diabetes, which Dee had talked about. So these are the two research I know is being done with the South Asian communities, and the participators are South Asian communities. Like you said, it's very difficult to get South Asian community participators, but we have community development officers who reach out to the minority communities to encourage them to pick up research, to get research, to undertake or get involved in research. And in Swindon, we have, fortunately, we have two community development officers in post with Swindon who will be working with the minority communities now. So hopefully with time, we'll be able to engage with the minority group, including the South Asians and other minority group. But yes, you are right. It's very difficult to engage the South Asians. And I would say most of the time, on my perspective, it's because we haven't done enough to reach out to them. But at the moment, everybody we've learned past experience. I've seen that our efforts to reach South Asian communities were being tokenistic, but now we are making sure we gain the trust, and then the community also gain our trust in order to be able to work with us. So yes, with time we'll engage more, and the trust will be built, and hopefully we can engage. We can have more participants of South Asian community background for research.
Susan, so you spoke about carers. What is the impact of carers looking after someone with dementia?
Well, it has a huge impact on carers, and often we see that the carers' health suffers as a result of that. I think it's really important that carers do register with a local carers centre. It can then they can get support. They can see if they've got a carers assessment, if they're entitled to any financial support, respite help, and things like that. So it's really important that people link up with their carers centre. But yeah, it's just obviously if it's a loved one, people just step in and don't necessarily think of the impact on their own health and well-being, what they do to support themselves and their own resilience, really. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to say recently 2 referrals we've had from the South Asian community have been when the families have hit breaking point, crisis point. And I think that's the big issue, is the thing about trust. Like Linda said, there's a lot of mistrust. People don't want to, in the South Asian communities, don't want to share things. They want to keep it within the family. And they get to the point where, they're at breaking point. A recent family are at breaking point. They need care. They haven't, wanted to ask for help. And I think there's also a bit of difficulties with carers as well, wanting somebody who could maybe speak the language as well is quite often difficult. And in Swindon at the moment, it's really difficult to get care anyway. One of the main things in the Great Western Hospital is social care and getting patients discharged out of the hospital because there isn't enough carers or care packages available. And we have referrals. Obviously, I get referrals from the hospital. I've just spent time with a South Asian family doing an attendance allowance form so they can gain some money to help with care. But it's these things, they wouldn't know about this, and they don't want to reach out and ask for help, or they don't know where to go to. And I think both the Alzheimer Society and Dementia UK have got very good websites and also leaflets in different languages what can help. And there's a lovely story at the moment on Dementia UK. Not trying to go on about it too much.
No, you can do it, Dee. Don't worry about it. We like a bit of digging up.
There's a guy called Mac who, from the South Asian community, with frontal lobe dementia. I think he was diagnosed in 2010, and he actually helps families. So he landed up having a heart problem, was in hospital with a heart problem when he got diagnosed with this frontal temporal lobe dementia. And he was too scared to tell his family. And in the end, he's told his family. He does a lot of work with Dementia UK, and you can find him on the website. And he talks about his diagnosis. He does Zoom meetings for the Asian communities. And yeah, it's really good. I've sort of listened to a couple of his Zoom podcast things, and yeah, so I think we do need the links like yourself. You're going to be broadcasting this as a podcast, which is good. And I know I even listen to your podcast. I go running and listen to some of your podcasts, and I just think for people out there which are maybe too scared or to approach somebody, by listening to things like podcasts or going on the websites. And I know some of the older generation can't go on the websites, but it's nice that you ladies, Taj and Bal, that you can, you're sort of modern day girls, and you can use all this technology and you can sort of link with your parents and that. But it's quite a lot of the older generations, and traditionally, like you said, you used to live with grandparents. But I think today, as culture's sort of changing and people have grown away from that, and there's more people not so much having extended families, it's quite hard. And one of my other South Asian families I've got is a lady with dementia, but her son lives in London. So I think it's these, this distances where he's not seeing her. He might speak to her every day, but he's not seeing her every day. He might not pick up on these tiny little things that, I would have seen if I, going to visit my dad daily. So yeah, so it's really important, I think, is reaching out and trying to bridge the gap. And it's good that the Alzheimer's Society have got people that, can bridge the gap as well and be links.
I was just going to say a lot of our work is around promoting living well with dementia. So although the label of dementia is really scary and undoubtedly has a huge impact both on the individual and the family, it's about how we can support people to live well with their dementia. What can we do to help them live independently, to still do the things that they really love doing? They might not be able to do them in the same way on their own or what have you, but how can we get the best for that person and the family set up with the carers to support them? And we have lots of different community support groups, memory cafes. The Alzheimer's Society has Singing for the Brain, which is amazing songs, and people really enjoy that. And the people that run those groups can often pick up on people that come along. So if they like particular songs or they've got particular backgrounds or what have you, they can bring that out in the choices that within the memory cafes or activities or songs that they sing. So there is an awful lot out there, and often carers find coming along to those cafes or what have you as much a benefit as the person living with dementia that comes along. So they get to network, to meet other families or other carers in the same situation, and that sort of strong network of support that they're there for each other is really important.
I've learned so much in this podcast. I mean, like I said, it's things I hadn't even thought about. But a few weeks ago, we recorded a podcast about diabetes, and it came up with the same messages. We need to work on prevention because with the fact that there is less funding out there for everybody, the NHS, the societies that are doing research, it's becoming tougher. Community, a lot of care is being, people are being sent to community care, and we don't have perhaps the carers that we need, whether it's a language barrier or other factors. As we come to the end of this podcast, if someone is suffering from dementia, whether it's at early stages or later on, could you just give us your top tips on what they should be doing?
The most important thing is getting early diagnosis. So if you've got any concerns at all about memory, the cognitive function, communication problems, anything which you might think's not quite right, is getting an early diagnosis with your GP, getting your referral to the memory clinic, get all the diagnostic tests out the way. Then look at, the memory clinic's really good. They will signpost to like Alzheimer's Society. They quite often send us referrals. So, we can help. Dementia UK, as well as us nurses in the Great Western, getting the information out there. Do find out as much as you can for yourselves. Also, like you say, looking after yourself. So making sure you get enough sleep, healthy diet, exercise, and also things like brain training, just doing something every day, sort of word puzzles, anything that keeps your brain stimulated. So things like that help. It's not a cure, but, it will help prevent. So keeping yourself well, physically well, mentally well, and good diet and lifestyle. So yeah.
Perfect. Linda, do you want to add anything from what you're seeing from the Alzheimer's Society?
Yes, and I couldn't stress on what Dee has just said, to seek early diagnosis, because there is support out there. Like Dee said, once there is a diagnosis, and we get a referral, or you reach out to us, we offer practical guidance, we offer information, advice that is tailored to the individual needs. So it's not a general information. We offer information that is tailored to the individual needs. We talked about benefits the individual might be entitled to. And like Susan also said, groups, we signpost you to groups and activities, because research has evidence that activities and groups helps in the slows the progression of the diseases. That's a lot of stimulation. So we signpost you to all the activities and groups in the community, which there is a lot in the community. So I would say reach out when you have, if you already have the diagnosis, please reach out. There is help, there is support available. If you are experiencing memory problems, please reach out to your GP, make a diary, use the Alzheimer's Society checklist, see your doctor, get a diagnosis, come to people like ourselves, Alzheimer's Society, like Dee from Dementia UK. We are available to support you, help you. And I always say, dementia is not the end. Having dementia is a journey, and you can live well, you can live a meaningful and a fulfilled life even after the diagnosis of dementia. Thank you.
Perfect. Susan, do you want to add anything
Oh,
there?
what can I add to that? I think
I know.
Lovely.
Linda just did a mic drop there, didn't she?
That's Linda.
Just echo that really. Every day in our jobs we go to different groups, we meet up with people with dementia and carers who, as Linda said, are living really meaningful lives. They have days of real joy and lots of family, and able to do things in maybe a different way. So although it's very scary to go and get a diagnosis, and I know lots of people who have put it off and really worried about it, there's a lot of caring professionals who are there to support you, and lots of support services who are brilliant. So yeah, not to be afraid to go and get the diagnosis, or just investigate it with GP.
Perfect. Before we say thank you, I do want to let the people in Swindon know that we are doing a number of events to raise awareness about mental health, and that will be under the banner of Sahara Health Fair. Sahara itself means support, and like everyone here has said, there is support out there, and that's something that our organisation wants to show. There will be medical professionals at the events. There will be stall holders, so you can look at different health priorities within the South Asian community as well. So come along, find out when the next Sahara Health Fair is within Swindon. The first one, depending on when you're listening to this, it may well be after the event, but I'm going to say it anyway, is the 21st of May at 12 to 4 p.m. in the Broad Green Community Centre. So please do join us, and we do have a series of other events that are being organised throughout the year. We also, the Changing Suits organisation does do local wellbeing events as well. So find out about those events. If you're not on the WhatsApp group, please do get in touch, and we will get you on there so you find out about all of the events. For everybody else who's not in Swindon, like myself, we are doing a lot more work within dementia, because we do realise that this is something that isn't spoken about enough. Like I've said, I've learned so much within this podcast itself. So thank you so much, ladies, for enlightening us, raising awareness within the South Asian community, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.